Hey guys, my name's Sam, and I'm here with my co host, Skinny Medic, and welcome to Civilian Medical Podcast episode number 67. What are we talking about today, Skinny?
So today we're going to talk about improvised medicine. Seems to be a hot topic on the Instagram world, in the interwebs right now. So not all people just walk around with 12 cat tourniquets, a full backpack from Vertex on all the time. So being able to improvise medicine definitely has its advantages. It's probably not the ideal situation, but when you're talking through, TCCC or TEC, you always should have a backup plan. Like you should have your primary plan, your backup plan, and then another plan, and then maybe another plan on top of that. But we're going to talk about it, kind of deep dive. We've got some pictures to show for the YouTube video, but I'm excited about this podcast. I think it'll be a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get too far into it, I think you just got a new toy that was sent to you, not to me. I'm not salty about it at all, but what'd you get?
I definitely bragged about this 100%. So our podcast is sponsored by Primary Arms, which I greatly appreciate the sponsorship there. And out of nowhere, we mentioned it on the last video. I was like, hey, if you got something cool, would love to get it. And I guess they felt bad for me because you've got more subscribers than me, more follows on Instagram. So I was like, sucker, you may be bigger than me, but I get some cool stuff. So they sent the 16-inch Expo upper from Primary Arms. So it is got the M-Lock rail. It's got a little simple bird cage on it. I did put it on an Anderson lower, kind of going through because it's like the patrol rifle series. So I was kind of thinking about a patrol officer because cops don't make a lot of money. So I was like, hey, let's put it on an Anderson lower, not going super expensive there. And then I did a Holosun optic with a 3x magnifier on it. So kind of thinking about a patrol officer, a road guy who may throw this in his back of his car, back of his Tahoe, and this would be a long gun for him. So I got to work on a strap and got to put a light on it. So just kind of that's what I'm building it for. Thinking about if I was a police officer and I made $25,000 a year and I wanted a long gun instead of a 12 gauge because that's what my department issued, this is how I would build it. So what are your thoughts? I know you pretend to carry a gun on at work, so just a little
I'm a
jab there.
poser. I'm a poser. Yeah, I like it. I'd probably add some backup iron sights there just because I guess, electronics fail. But I'm super jealous. Now if Lindsay reaches out and it turns out they sent her one too, like I'm just gonna flip. Like I'm done. I quit this channel.
All
But
right,
yeah,
I will
that
work on
that's
it.
that's pretty awesome.
The other thing I wanted to show, and I kind of surprised you with this, I didn't think about it, is Blue Alpha Gear sent me this tourniquet holster. So it's basically has it's not a plastic backing, but it's kind of a hard plastic. And then your cat and soft T slide down into here. Also has a spot for a Sharpie or deco needle, wherever you'd like. But you can weave it into your belts, horizontal or vertical, however you want to. And this little extra flap here that you see is made to go up under the cummerbund of a plate carrier.
Oh,
So you
cool.
can mount it a couple different ways. I've played with it a little bit. I haven't seen how well durable the plastic backing is, but I don't think there'll be much stress there, to be honest with you. But Blue Alpha Gear sent it to me, and I think it's pretty cool. So I told them to send you one as well. So I'm working on that for you. I'm trying to at least get you a tourniquet holder. I may not get you an AR, but I can at least get you a tourniquet holder.
Cool. So when it comes to improvised medicine, I think we should start with why we're talking about this today. And I guess for me, I suggested the topic because of the subway shooting that recently happened in New York and some of the images arising from that. And I think it's important to look at how to improvise correctly because you can improvise. Like saying like never improvise, I think is kind of a naive stance for things because like we're not all carrying tourniquets all the time. We don't always have the ability to use these like high-end commercial options. So looking at some of those pictures, I don't want this to be, a Monday morning quarterback or a backseat quarterback or anything like that. People were trying and I think that's great, but I think we're going to throw out some critiques.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that. I do try to carry some medical on me, but there's times that I just don't, and I'm lazy about it. I'm like, all right, never mind. I'm not going to carry that ankle kit today. Or if I'm on the ambulance, I definitely, because I get called out about it, so I definitely have to carry my stuff then. But uh, yeah, I don't always have a cat tourniquet on me or soft T or something like that. Like, I love the soft T. I don't always have it on me. And you've done a video on like art minimalist. So what would you carry like in your back pocket? Maybe it's just compressed gauze, maybe it's a SWAT T, uh, things like that. So, but there's times when you don't need it, or not you don't need it. There's times you're going to need it that you don't have all your equipment. So, to be able to improvise, maybe you run out of equipment. That's my fear. Is that I'm in that subway bombing now? I have 8 patients, and somebody gets a cat. Maybe it's the highest bidder, but then everybody else gets improvised medicine.
Yep, absolutely. So, what's the photo? Do you want to bring up the photo that you found there?
Yeah. So let's see if I can share screen. And because you guys are listening to the podcast, you should watch the YouTube video because you can see the videos there. So this was the first one we talked about.
Yeah, so here, this is one of the photos taken immediately after. And one of the weird things about this shooting is that I believe everybody sustained lower extremity injuries. So I don't know if he was purposely doing that, if it was just happenstance, but usually in civilian shootings, we see a lot more torso trauma and a couple ancillary arm and leg injuries. But here, everybody's shot in the leg, as far as I know. And in the back of the photo, you see a gentleman applying something to a woman's leg, and then in the foreground, there's another gentleman laying down with an improvised tourniquet as well. And I think like anybody that's done EMS professionally has had somebody come up like we put a tourniquet in place, and it's one of these. It's a T-shirt with an overhand knot just tied tight above the injury, with the bystanders believing that this is adequate tourniquet. So neither of these tourniquets here look like they are viable options. The gentleman in the button-down shirt in the back might be applying a commercial tourniquet or something that's actually working, but I can't really tell what he's putting on there.
He's definitely putting some pressure on something, whether that be getting his slack out, get ready to put the windlass. Like, I don't know, but he's definitely pulling some pressure on there. The thing that I noticed, and when I do my after action videos, is one of the things we talk about is that, oh my gosh, there's a lot of blood. There's a little bit of blood, but there's not like in this particular picture, like not a lot of blood on the ground, on the clothes, things like that. So I would don't necessarily think these people needed a tourniquet.
Yeah, so I think that's the thing is that like most of the time these bleeds aren't going to need tourniquets. I don't think either of these bleeds really need a tourniquet. Now, when in doubt, if these were commercial options, I wouldn't fault an officer or bystanders for throwing on a cat tourniquet or a commercial option there. But in this case, I don't think they needed it, which is good because I don't think anything applied to anybody in this picture is actually a adequate blood stopping device in these cases. And I think that brings up a bigger point when it comes to improvised tourniquets is we do it very, very poorly. A belt around there and held tight doesn't work. A T-shirt overhand knotted doesn't work. You need mechanical advantage to make these things work. And we've shot ourselves in the foot because what do we call it when, a druggie takes a belt and they do a, quote, tourniquet on their arm to, help pump up their veins? We call it a tourniquet. Same with an IV start. We put that little rubber band on. And those are tourniquets in a different sense where they stop venous return to the heart, and that helps pump up your veins to actually get a needle in there. But it's not actually stopping their arterial flow. So a improperly done tourniquet can actually speed up blood flow if you don't stop all of the atrial flow because you're not getting any of that return there, and it's actually going to backlog those veins a little bit and make them bleed faster. So it's super important we get this right. So you just pulled up another photo of this. It's a woman holding pressure on her leg. This looks like a little bit of a better bleed.
This definitely does, and I'm super thankful they all had their mask on while they're bleeding out. But I also look at the difference in environments here too. Like the first picture we showed, the air is clear. Like I feel like there's not as much fog, smoke, things like that. And now we're kind of getting the more like we see some heavy smoke in the air. So we're definitely in a different kind of environment, I feel like. But yeah, like this person's their sweatpants, the gray sweatpants are soaked in blood. So I definitely think that needs to be taken a look at. Like maybe it just needs a pressure bandage, but it might just very well need a tourniquet. And I did a video. I know you did a video maybe 2 weeks ago on the March algorithm, and then I did a video on how to build a trauma kit. And then in that video, I talked about the how high and tight versus 2 to 3 inches above. And of course, every time I do that, there's somebody going to talk crap, and I can't make anybody happy on that.
Well,
But
in Black
typically, what
Hawk
I
Down, his femoral artery came back up into his abdomen and he
oh
died.
my gosh, I'm gonna need some alcohol. Um, but so this is to me like these two pictures here. Like one environment looks a lot calmer than the next environment. Like this environment, just like a quick picture, looks a little bit more chaotic to me. So typically, I tell our guys and when I'm teaching is that if the scene is calm, 2 to 3 inches above is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But if the scene is not calm or it's you're still under care under fire, then high and tight is perfectly fine. Like so, depending on where your environment is depending on where I'd place this tourniquet and how I need to improvise that.
Yeah, and I think like you're saying, and to kind of compound on that, is that this woman's leg, we can't actually see where she's bleeding from. I'm gonna assume it's under, or maybe it's a he, I don't know. Maybe it's under their left hand there. That's where I assume the bleed is, but that bleed could be on their knee. That bleed could be down a little bit farther. It just depends because that blood's seeping through the pants. So it's not going to be like from the blood down isn't necessarily where the bleed is. And if you just don't instantly know where somebody's bleeding from, high and tight's the way to go. If you can see it, like if somebody's wearing shorts and you can see the blood spurting out of a hole, then there's zero reason to go high and tight, in my opinion. 2 to 3 inches above, go from there. And then, like you said, what's the scene look like? I believe Smoke's in this area because I think he tried to ignite a improvised explosive device, and I think that failed. So, like, this is one of those situations where I'd be trying to get people out of this area, probably before even trying to address those bleeds, get them at least a little bit more distance, and then apply tourniquets.
Definitely. And the fact that I have multiple patients, if I'm by myself, everything's going high and tight because I don't have time to expose her wound and go, oh, let me cut your pants leg here while the dude beside her is bleeding out. So I'm going to go high and tight. And one of the things, like you said, is in TEC, TCCC, whichever class you talk about, we do talk about getting off the X. And this is a priority here. Like the X is not when you are getting shot at, but we think about getting off the X because this is a bad environment. If you're just going to create more injuries if you stay right where you're at. So moving and triaging patients is important here. I know kind of scrolling off a little bit, but figuring out who actually needs you and who doesn't need you. And probably the patient that is screaming at you the most doesn't need you. So that can be difficult as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about improvising tourniquets, we kind of talked about the failures a little bit. The biggest failures I see and the biggest bad improvised tourniquets I see are belts. Belts are never a viable option. They simply do not work. And then the other thing I see is that the shirt knotted really tight or the piece of fabric knotted really tight over the leg. And neither one is going to be effective ever. In my experience, I've never seen one work. And most of the time they're applied, the patient didn't need one, so they're going to be fine regardless. But those are the two I've seen. Have you seen other bad improvised tourniquets?
Trying to think. I think I've seen some towels, like some big, thick towels that they're trying to just grab what they can. So they're super thick. So they're not really getting any kind of pressure constriction. And then the super small, like zip ties. Like I have seen someone run zip tie or like the black electrical tape. I've seen that. People trying to, and it's just way too narrow. It's cutting. But I believe, and if Andrew Fisher is listening to this, he can correct us, which I'm sure he will. But belts are about 50% accurate. And like I said, I don't have the data to back that up on a PDF, but it's my understanding they're about 50-50. So you do have about a 50-50 shot of them working, but I don't want to bet my life on 50%. Like that's still a pretty good go there. So, I think using too much bulk, like too much material, because you're not actually getting good compression, and then like a zip tie, electrical tape is way too thin. So if you do get some mechanical advantage, like you were talking about, like you find something metal, something rigid, and you start spinning, you'll start cutting, and that's going to be really painful for your patient.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're probably not going to get the occlusion pressures you need either. And I think like with the belt thing, 50%, it works while you're holding it. But like unless you're poking another hole in the belt right there for the compression you need, like you have to hold that belt the entire time, and chances are you're not going to hold even pressure. So I would say in an uncontrolled environment, belts are probably less than 50% um, for working really well. Although, once again, I don't have the data to back that up. And actually, I think there's a couple points we're talking about today without the actual data in front of us. But so how would you go about, like, is a tourniquet? Do you think a tourniquet is a viable thing to improvise, and why would we do it?
So I don't like in our civilian classes. I don't even really. I kind of touch on the improvised tourniquets, but I really don't even teach them because I would think direct pressure and even more wound packing or good solid direct pressure is a better choice. Like if I have a 50-50 shot at getting a tourniquet to work, I'm like, I can hold some solid direct pressure and make that work better. I feel like, or maybe I get a bystander to hold pressure. Like there's plenty of people in the subway that I could get to help me, and I can walk them through how to hold pressure, and then I can let them go. These are our green tags that we commonly use. They're walking wounded, they're screaming their heads off, so I would use them. And I think being able to hold direct pressure, even taking that t-shirt, that gauze, whatever, and just putting it down in the wound and putting all of your body weight is a better choice than improvising tourniquets.
Yeah, I mean, a t-shirt's super easy. You don't really have to cut it up all that much. You can take a t-shirt, it's tight knit fabric, and you can start shoving it in the hole and packing it as full as you can, and then holding pressure is going to be pretty viable, I think, in most situations. Even, on an extremity, it's not the most ideal thing, but it's definitely something you can do for that. So like everybody's got a t-shirt on, I mean, hopefully, I guess, at least, or, some kind of fabric on them that they can pack for them. So I agree. That's what I advise people to do if they're asking about it. And that's all you have. I think having the knowledge of how to pack a wound is the most important thing here. And it's something you can carry with you all the time if you don't have commercial devices on you.
Yeah, it says here, this is early into the post, it says that 10 people were shot in the subway. I'm like, man, like, can you imagine? You're by yourself going to work, whatever, and all of a sudden now you have 10 patients in front of you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you have Jack with you. That would suck.
I think one thing to add, you touched on it. There is that the one disadvantage to wound packing is you need somebody to hold pressure. You got 10 patients, like you just said, and you have to move on to other people, but you can't just pack stuff into a wound and then not do anything with it and just leave it, because it's going to start bleeding again. So you either need the patient to aid in their own rescue, which might be hard for somebody that's just been shot. If they're losing a lot of blood, to hold that pressure, it's painful. They're not going to want to do it. Maybe they're not completely with it. Or you need a bystander, or you need a really tight pressure dressing, which you can improvise, but it's a little bit harder than just taking a t-shirt, shoving it in a wound. So I think that's the one disadvantage of just doing the wound pack, and maybe a case for an improvised tourniquet is that you have to be able to move on.
And we're not dropping knees anymore, right?
We're not dropping knees anymore. I don't think we should be dropping knees anymore. There's data going both ways. There's a couple good ones that have like how to do it. Anyways, I don't drop knees. I don't think we should be dropping knees. I think we should be prioritizing at site injury care personally.
What if you have 10 patients, like, and you're by yourself, and like, hey, and you can talk someone into dropping a knee and try to get a pressure point, like, just playing devil's advocate. Like, I'm on board with you, but just to play devil's advocate, like, if you're trying to improvise a tourniquet and you look over and someone else is bleeding 10 feet from you, and Joe Schmo's over there trying to do something, trying to help, like,
I mean, it's really hard to really break some of these improvised situations down, because it's really no holds barred. In these cases, like, do what you can. And that's why I'll never like condemn somebody for at least trying something. Even if the tourniquet wasn't effective, like, at least they're out there trying to do something. They're trying to stop the bleeding. And even though badly placed tourniquet is probably going to be worse than no tourniquet at all, like, I mean, I'm not ever going to tell somebody like, hey, don't go try to help. So if a knee drop's what you got, a knee drop's what you got. And you go try to do it, and hopefully it's going to benefit your patient. So I guess that's what I'd say on it. I think there's a time and a place, but I personally don't practice knee drops and wouldn't do it even in this situation.
Yeah, like I'm on your side. I was just throwing different, like, we taught a TEC class to a group of kids couple weeks ago, and like we totally skipped over the knee drop thing. We're like, all right, we're not teaching that anymore. Like we're just gonna go straight to a tourniquet and do it. And someone brought it up. They're like, hey, should I put a knee in this guy's groin? And I'm like, oh, if you want to, but take him to lunch first.
Right.
But do like just focus on getting the tourniquet on. Like just focus on that. Like you're gonna have a hard enough time getting that on without worrying about where your knee's at. So just focus on that. But yeah, I think the bystander effect definitely comes into effect here too. And I was glad to see so many people involved. Like most of the time, it seems like people don't want to get involved. Like we see other stuff and they're just going to keep walking. They throw their blinders up and like, hey, I don't want to help. I don't want to get involved. But to see so many people trying to do something is awesome. Like that makes me happy.
Agreed. So if somebody was going to improvise a tourniquet, how could we make that actually a viable thing? How do we make a tourniquet actually work when we're improvising it? Because, I mean, they do work. They were taught for years. You can make a good tourniquet, and if you train on it, you can improvise a tourniquet, I think, with pretty high effectiveness. Maybe not rapid application, but a pretty effective device.
Yep. And you've kind of touched on it before. Like you've got to have the mechanical advantage. Like just doing an overhand knot on a t-shirt, it's not going to get you the mechanical advantage. So if you can find something that you can get mechanical advantage to make it tighter. So whether that be a screwdriver or I don't want to say a pencil, honestly,
No.
because they'll break. Even a pen will break. So something sturdy. Like I'm looking here, like I have a little small screwdriver, like that would be kind of difficult, but that's just what I can grab. I have an AR wrench laying right here. Like this would be fantastic. I could make a tourniquet out of this. I can get a heck of mechanical advantage on that. That's a 1 inch or 1 foot piece of metal. Like I can do that. But something that a piece of material that I could get 2 inches wide and at least, around 2 inches wide that I could do an overhand knot with, put something in the middle of that knot, tie it, another overhand knot, and start to rotate until I got bleeding stopped. And then I'm going to get someone else to come say, hey, hold this right here. Don't let it unwind. Don't move. Don't let the patient unwind too, because I guarantee this is going to hurt like really bad. And they're going to want to undo that tourniquet. Like I've seen people try to take cats off or soft tees off. And so you got to put a bystander there to help encourage not to take the tourniquet back off and to make sure it doesn't unwind, because it's probably going to be good luck trying to get that thing secured if you're just going to tie it off. That's going to be difficult. I've seen people do it with keys and carabiners. I think I actually did a video on that probably 10 years ago. But just have like a regular pair of keys. You put the carabiner in, you loop it around, and then you can actually use the metal loop from your keys to lock it into place. I don't remember who I stole it from. I stole that idea from somebody. But there's ways to do it, but you got to find that mechanical advantage to get a twisting motion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like then getting it secured, like you said, is super important. So having a bystander to help you out or having a way to secure it. I don't really think tying another thing around the leg to secure it, like in those situations, I feel like it's something that's going to get quite a lot when it comes to improvised devices. So yeah, that's exactly how I was taught when I went through outdoor emergency care for ski patrol 12 years ago. Now that's how they taught us to do it is, you take a triangular bandage, you wrap it around the leg, and then they'd have us take our trauma scissors and put it in there and then loop it. And then you can take like the carabiner through the loop of the trauma shears and connect it to the strap you have. And that's going to work for you pretty well. So you're bringing up some photos of the Boston bombing. So I alluded to this earlier. Another thing that I can't find the article on, but there was a write-up on the improvised tourniquets during the Boston bombing there, and I think there were 12 applied. And once again, Andrew Fisher, correct
If you're
us.
listening,
If you're listening, please feel free to rip us a new one in the comments there. But my understanding was that out of the 12 improvised tourniquets, not a single one was deemed effective when they arrived at the receiving facility. So,
but no one died from that, I believe. Correct? Like, am I misspoken about that?
I don't think anybody died from a badly done tourniquet.
Correct.
Yes, I don't think that was like ever ruled like a cause of death. Now, like you can't really know because we don't know like were there people that interventions were performed on that ended up dying. Yeah. But I don't think you can link any of that back to like a bad tourniquet or anything like that. I think the saving grace here is a lot of times when tourniquets are applied or improvised tourniquets are applied, the patient probably didn't need a tourniquet in the first place. So Just something to consider here. I mean, this was a huge event with a lot of bystanders, and then we saw that improvised medicine, I think, kind of failing in this case.
Yeah, because what we've always been taught in is that you can bleed out in your femoral artery in 3 minutes. So all your blood volume, 5 liters ish, is on the ground. So in 3 minutes. So in a minute and a half, you're in irreversible shock. Means your body's not coming back from it. You could be on the table of the surgeon and nothing's going to change. Like you're dead. You've lost too much. The kidneys are dying. You're in multi-system organ failure. Things are bad. So by the time all of that goes down, their patient probably bled out if they needed a tourniquet. Like, and I hate to be like that, but honestly, like I think if they really need a tourniquet in 3 minutes, all their blood's on the ground and you got a big mess to clean up. So if you're made it to this point, they probably a pressure bandage will work just fine.
Yep, absolutely. Pressure bandage, wound packing, whatever you can do there, just holding that direct pressure is super important. I think I don't think people should get too hung up about trying to improvise a tourniquet. I think, like we've kind of said a couple times here, is just that pressure is king on it. And really, bleeding control, no matter how you're doing it, it all comes down to pressure. It's just where that pressure is applied and how it's applied. But pressure is going to be what stops major bleeding in a lot of these cases.
Yeah. And don't shove a tampon in there. Like that's just going to absorb the blood. Like we're not going to pressure. Like I knew it was going to come. Like someone's already in the comments talking about tampons. So yeah, tampon is not improvised medicine.
I mean, think about it this way. You can let them die, or you can put a tampon in their wound and they're going to die. So at least let them die with dignity without a tampon in their wound. All right. Like just let your buddy die with dignity at that point. If that's what you want to do for him.
Yeah. Like you got fired up about Narcan the other day. Like I will oh my gosh, tampons drive me nuts. So yeah, don't shove a tampon in the wound. A t-shirt, introduce yourself first before you take the t-shirt off and shove it in the hole and hold pressure, like as much pressure as you can. But this isn't like the American Red Cross, like, oh, you put your like fingers on it, like, oh, I'm going to hold pressure and everything's going to be okay. Like, no, this is all of your body weight, 2 hands, and stop as much pressure, stop the bleeding as much as you can. At least slow it down.
Absolutely. I wish I would have remembered this before we started filming so we could have found the video. But there is a show that it's like, I don't know if it's like Live Rescue, if that's what it's called. It's a documentary series of like people that filmed like crazy things happening to them or their buddies. And it's actually really well done because it's all like GoPro footage. The narrator isn't like crazy dramatic about stuff, and they interview people after the fact, and like everybody in this survives. But there's one where this bicyclist, he's on a mountain bike race, and he hits a bump. He goes over the handlebars, and at the last second, his handlebars twist, and the brake slams right into his femoral artery. Like it stabs him, his brake on the bike. And he like comes out, and his buddy is like kind of laughing as he comes up. And then you see him like sitting, and he's like, wow, something's not right. And in his lap, it's just pooling blood, and it's pouring. It's a femoral artery lack. And this biker had no medical training, but somehow like intuited that wound packing is what he had to do. So you see him, he takes his fingers, he shoves them in his thigh, and he puts direct pressure on this femoral artery bleed. And he's successfully able to hold that for, I think it was like 2 or 3 hours until they were able to get him out of there. It was like in Chile or some other country. And the firefighters like get there, and it took them forever to get there. They finally got there, and you had that one. Oh, you have a video? Oh, it shows how much I watch your channel.
Yeah, this is After Action, January 9th, 2017. I'm going to play
all
it.
those buzz lads were fake. There's no such game. But today
Hey, welcome to another video from Skinny Medic.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yep. So 2017, before you were on YouTube, I did an After Action on that. So yes, that guy survived because his buddy is just bearing him pressure there.
Yeah. So yeah, and like he's holding it, and it's crazy. Like the fire department gets there, and they like try to have him release it, and it doesn't work. Like, but it shows like he lacerated the largest extremity artery in your body. He completely lacerated. If you did nothing, he'd be dead in a couple minutes. But he's able to maintain that for hours with direct pressure only, and like that works. There's no tourniquet there. He's able to do pinpoint pressure on that wound, and it's working just fine. So I think that's a great, that really illustrates, how effective that can be.
Yep. So if you go to my Skinny Medic YouTube channel, go to After Actions, and you'll see it. It says bike wreck shows high junctional injury. So you can watch that video that Sam's talking about. So that made me smile. I was like, oh, I know exactly what he's talking about. Let me find it in my 500 videos since forever.
Side note, that show, I need to figure out what the name of it is and what platform it is. I watched it all like at work with coworkers. It's a crazy show, and there's some rescues. I think the first one's like a kayaker, and he like goes over the falls and is essentially like dead in the middle of nowhere. And they get him back somehow. Cool. Like there's some really good ones out there if you want to see some cool rescues and stuff. Really cringy things too.
Definitely. So what happens if I do an improvised tourniquet and I'm not a paramedic, not a nurse? Maybe I had a Stop the Bleed course. Maybe I watch PrepMedic on YouTube. Maybe I watch Skinny Medic on YouTube. And I find myself in a situation like this. Should I be scared to do anything?
No, absolutely not. Especially like it's kind of funny, especially if you're untrained. You have much less chance of litigation from doing stuff than the higher trained you are, the more chances of litigation there are. Now, granted, pretty much anybody from completely untrained to a physician is covered under Good Samaritan laws if they're doing basic care. And I'm not a lawyer on this, so make sure you follow what your state's.
Yeah. Hashtag we're not lawyers.
Hashtag we're not lawyers, clearly. But with that, like you're covered under Good Samaritan laws. So if you find somebody and you're trying to help them and somehow that tourniquet gets applied to their neck and you end up killing them with the tourniquet somehow, that's a bad example because I think you'd get charged with something there. But if your intervention does more harm than good, and you were in good faith trying to help somebody, you weren't getting paid to help somebody at that point, you're covered under Good Samaritan laws and you're pretty much immune to litigation at that point. So you don't have to be worried about somebody coming after you for it. Now, if you try to crike them with a pen and a kitchen knife, you're not covered anymore. Like, I don't quite know where that line is, but when you bridge into more advanced skills, that's when Good Samaritan completely wears off. And you can really get hung out to dry with litigation. And we're a very sue-happy country, so there is definitely a chance somebody's going to come after you for it.
Yeah, like every time I do a video, there's always a question like, can I do this as a Good Samaritan? Can I do this? And that line is, I hate to say this, but as a non-lawyer person, I think that's a gray area because I've always get like, all right, can I put an MPA in as a Good Samaritan? I'm like, probably not, but no one's probably going to say anything to you if you drop, like, I don't, like, again, if it goes bad, then maybe. Someone asked about a bag valve mask. Is a bag valve mask on my last video, is that covering a Good Samaritan? If I pull a BVM out and start trying to bag someone the best I know how to, I'm like, I don't know the answer to that.
That's a good question. I don't know.
I think a tourniquet absolutely is. I think wound packing is, because those are covered in Stop the Bleed courses, bleedingcontrol.org. Those are all covered. I think you're fine there. I think doing CPR is good. If you're trying to hold pressure, I think if you're trying to stop someone from choking, but at some point it does cross that line. And is it an MPA? That's an EMT skill. Like, where is that? Like, I don't know the answer to that. And I think those are gray areas. We obviously know that starting an IV on someone on the side of the interstate, when you are a forklift driver by trade, and now you're like, hey, I saw Skinny Medic show me how to start an IV back in 2008. Like, I'm going to show you how to do that. So you do that. Or you pull out your pen and MacGyver a crack. Like, yes, that's obvious, well above your skill. That's an advanced skill. That's going to get you in trouble. But if you're doing this and you drop an MPA in someone and put them in a recovery position, I'm like, dang, that's awesome. Like, I wouldn't say anything to you, but I was like, hey, did you watch my videos? Like, but I don't know the answer to those.
Yeah. So along those same lines, now that we're talking about crikes, let's move on a little bit from bleeding control and talk about some of the other improvised things we do. Like, I think keep it within the massive trauma area, just because that I think is the most common situation we're looking at for like needing to improvise somebody right then. But we were talking earlier about how on this subway shooting, everybody was shot in the legs miraculously. Usually in civilian shootings, people are shot in the torso because I had a video on this. Most people are probably not wearing plate carriers unless you live in a super, super interesting city. So chest seals are a big thing. Chicago. Yeah. Chest seals are a big thing. So improvising those, I think you can use any number of things. I think the best, quickest way to improvise a chest seal is to take your hand. Oh, there it is. Take your hand and slap it on their chest. And you can hold pressure on that. Not even pressure, just you can hold a seal with your hands and it's going to work just fine. But you can obviously escalate from there, right?
Yeah, I think even like a piece of plastic, like the old, like you always heard like the stories like Vietnam era, like, oh, I took my cigarette pack and I cut the plastic off and made a chest seal. So I think some kind of piece of plastic, something that doesn't allow air to transfer back and forth is it. I like just holding pressure. I don't know if you've ever tried to tape something on someone's chest that's diaphoretic, pouring sweat, they're pale, they look like crap, and you're trying to put some cloth medical tape on there. It does not work. Like nothing sticks. It's just going to run off. So I do like just if I don't have hyphen chest seals, all right, hold pressure right here. Maybe it's a piece of plastic. Maybe it's a glove, hand, whatever you can get, but something to hold pressure. And there again, like I don't want to get over. Like this guy has 4 bullet holes to the chest. Like I may be running out of hands very quickly. So I may need some help. But just, yeah, I think holding pressure is what I would say, because trying to tape things on people's chests is like using Scotch tape is going to be ridiculous. It's not going to work.
Yeah, it sounds like a good idea when you're practicing. And I think there's a lot of first aid classes that are like, see, you take the duct tape, you tape 3 sides, and now it's a vented chest seal. There's a time where that's going to work, but like even these commercial ones that have like crazy adhesives on them, like even those have trouble sticking on a lot of these patients. So like getting that blood off long enough to get that chest seal on, that it works. Like the duct tape, I've had very bad luck with it. I think the 2 times I've tried to do it.
They've got the super hairy chest, and like you just can't, like it's easy to tape it on the mannequin when the mannequin has no chest hair, they're not sweating. Cool, I can take my time and I'll tape it on the corners and I can make this look nice and pretty. But in real life, when the dude's 350 pounds and he has a big barrel chest, he's got hair all over the place, and you're trying to duct tape some stuff on there, it does not work.
No, it doesn't. I think there's still EMS agencies out there using like the petroleum gauze wrappers for chest seals, which that's ridiculous to me. That is insane to me that some of you, yes, I'm talking to you, are still doing that.
Yeah, the service I started with still has petroleum gauze on the truck for chest seals. Now the service I work for now, thank goodness, has commercial grade chest seals. So, yeah, it is. But it's a budget thing. Like it is if they can spend 85 cents on petroleum gauze versus $14 for hyphen chest seals or halo chest seals, they're gonna go 85 cents all day long.
Yeah.
And you're trying to tape. Now you're trying to open up packaging and you're trying to tape this and figure out which corners you want to tape. And you've got holes everywhere. And it's like, all right, just screw it. Let's just try fast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thoughts on like doing let's say you did get the tape to stick. Thoughts on doing 3-sided as opposed to 4-sided?
So I like taping them on the corners. Trying to see. Trying to steal a business card that I don't mind sharing. So like I've got a business card Holosun. So I keep across the corners, like here, here, and here, and here. So I come at a diagonal across all the corners. That way, if it's going to vent, it will vent out either top, side, bottom, left, or right. That way, whatever the least amount of pressure is takes for that chest seal to vent, then that's the way I'm going to tape it. If you tape it off, seal it off, then it has no way to vent. So if I just tape all 4 corners, all along the edges, there's nowhere for it to vent. But if even 3 sides, like if I come across here, on the top, across the side, and across the bottom, it still has to go all the way here to the left to vent. And that may take a lot of pressure building up in air or blood coming out. So that's the way I teach my students, is to tape the corners. That way it at least try to stick, and you can still make it vent, hopefully.
Yeah, and what's the danger if it doesn't vent?
The patient dies.
Game over. Yeah, that if you can get that tension pneumothorax that'll start pushing over the mediastinum and oversimplifying it, but it'll basically compress your major arteries and veins, and it'll make your heart stop. So,
and then they don't really need like the most stuff. Like if you're shot with a 22 in the chest, you probably don't need a chest seal because it's not going to become a second chest wound. Like it's got to be 3/4 size of the trachea to actually, because air's going to take the path of least resistance. So if it can still go in and out of the trachea, it's going to go in and out of the trachea. So I think we get hung up way too much on trying to do chest seals when it's a little pinhole, and I'm like, all right, don't calm down on that one.
I think chest seals are starting to fall out of favor. Like, I mean, it's still standard of care, it's still standard practice, but I've been seeing some things that are kind of suggesting that maybe chest seals are the next thing to be not phased out completely, but I think we're going to see a reduction in their use.
I do, because these patients need surgery. Like we can fix the bleeding in the leg. I temporarily fix it. Even with the improvised tourniquet. Like if someone's got a femoral artery bleed, a brachial, we can slow that bleeding down. We can stop it. We can give them a couple hours to surgery, but we can't do anything with the chest. Like you're not wound packing the chest. You're not shoving that towel, that shirt down in their gut, trying to get bleeding to stop. So these patients need surgery. They don't need us. They don't need first responders. They don't need paramedics. They certainly don't need flight paramedics. They just hang out on
flight paramedics.
Flight paramedics. Like they spend way too much time on scene, whatever, but don't get me on that soapbox. I don't even count your numbers. Like I do the data for my system, and like I count like how many trauma alerts we had and stuff. And I'm like, oh, I totally throw out the ones we fly out because they jack our scene times up. But these patients need surgery. All the ones that we're talking about with the Boston City Marathon or the subway bombings all need a surgeon. They need a trauma surgeon, and we need to. Whatever we can do to get them there quicker is what's ultimately going to have better patient outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. So chest seals, like that's the other thing of it. Let's talk about the crike, because we were just talking about it. I did a crike video a while back on that, and that was the number one question on there was, so if in a shit hits the fan scenario, can I take a pen and a knife, and can I cut their throat in the right spot and shove that in and make an airway? And my answer to that is no. If you're really that far removed from medical care and definitive care where that's an option, they're probably not going to survive the injury that caused them to have a crike, in my opinion. Do you see any viable option to do an improvised crike in the U.S. with what we have right now?
Yeah. No. What I get the question is like when you talk about doing an MPA, they're like, oh, will an MPA stop anaphylaxis, or is MPA a substitute for surgical crike? And I usually try to do a basic anatomy lesson with them and say, hey, where we are, where the MPA stops and we are doing a surgical crike are two different locations. And the surgical crike is lower than that. So you have a patient, crap hits the fan, the zombies are showing up, and your patient needs a surgical crike. The zombies are walking down the road. You drop a surgical crike. Boom. Okay. So now your patient's breathing, you're breathing for them probably. Hopefully they're not still breathing, or because that would be horrifying. And now what do? You have to sit with them. Like you're stuck. And they probably, like you said, they probably need surgery. And now we do not have the ability to do surgery with zombies showing up, walking down the road. So no, I don't see it. I think something like anaphylaxis, I'm like, man, that would suck. But yeah, I don't. Now I'm thinking about anaphylaxis. I'm like, so Joe Smo down the street gets stung by a bee. The zombies are walking down the road. Could I cut his throat and then get his EpiPen, stab him with his EpiPen, and he survives?
You're thinking about this too small. You could do the crike with his EpiPen. Just put his EpiPen right up against his cricothyroid membrane, and just right there. You get the crike, and you get some inhaled epi right there. It's kind of like an ET tube dose of epi,
and the
right?
epi would stop the bleeding too, wouldn't it? Like
yeah,
it would like localized bleeding.
Well, our next product. Please, if you're listening to this, if there's somebody that's like now contemplating going to do this, please don't. That was a joke for legal reasons, that was a joke.
But for reality, I'm like, oh man, like you have a needle crike. They're getting epi, and plus epi localized is going to stop the bleeding because I've never done a surgical crike in the field. I don't know if you have or not, Sam, but I've trained on them. I've done cadavers, I've done mannequins, but never pulled the trigger in real life. But I've seen them, like there's blood there. So I'm like, if you could stop that bleeding, like that would be fantastic.
I've done two crikes in the field. One completely unsuccessful because it was with the quick trach. Have you seen those? They're the big, for states that don't allow their paramedics to do surgical cricothyrotomies. They're like this big needle, has to be like a 5 gauge or something like that. And that one failed. Granted, I was a year and a half paramedic in the bottom of a mine shaft trying to do this to a guy. I did a lot of things wrong on that, but that didn't work. And then the surgical crike was a lot better, a lot easier. But yeah, there's blood there, so I don't know. Maybe we're onto something. Stay tuned for our next product release.
I do wonder if you could do like a spring-loaded trike. Now I'm thinking, like, what if you did like a spring-loaded one that went bloop and puts like ET tube down, like maybe like an IO, like like the spring-loaded. What's the sternal ILO? Like
the fast one or whatever it is.
Yeah, like move that up and do your landmarks and. Oh, that would suck.
I think I doubt we're gonna get approval for that one, but we can definitely try. So
we can get a recommendation for that one. Be fine.
In my opinion, I mean, just looking at the surgical crike and why you're doing it, I think there is a time where somebody would be breathing and you're doing a surgical crike for them. I think in those situations, you're looking at more like the combat medicine where somebody's just taking a bullet to the face, and it's time expedient. You're not doing a full sedation or something. There is a time and a place to, cut that throat and put in a crike, but that's not really an improvised crike. And then when you look at inserting a pen, one, that's a really small diameter. It's going to be hard for them to breathe through it. Number two, it's not shaped for the anatomy to go into that hole. And number three, it has nothing to actually protect the airway, which is one of the large reasons you're doing it. It's to stop the communication from your stomach to your trachea or, a massive amount of blood up above that falling into that. It's not doing anything to mitigate it. So I personally don't really think there's ever a reason to do a improvised crike at this level, or at least in this country, just because help is close. And I think if help wasn't close, they're probably not going to make it anyways. Like, this isn't a thing where you're going to be able to manage a patient for 2 days for prolonged field care with an improvised crike and no other tools at your disposal. I just don't think it's realistic.
No, and we do a terrible job at bagging patients, ventilating patients, stuff like that too. So you're going to create a whole lot of more mess of a problem for doing this. So I think if it was worst case scenario and my guy's dying anyway, then get the OB kit out, get the scalpel out, and let's do it. I don't know that my Microtech knife is sharp enough to do it. Maybe it is. Maybe my Microtech, maybe I can pull it out and start cutting, just go whacking away at it. But yeah, that's a bad day if we're having to improvise a surgical crike.
Yeah, I think so. There's one other thing I want to talk about for improvised medicine. I just thought of it is the pericardial thump for CPR if you don't have an AED. I haven't
seen that performed.
Have you seen it performed? Did it work for you?
Yes, it did.
Yep, I have one too, where my paramedic preceptor, my first job, dude went into VFib in front of us, and then all of a sudden, bam, and he went back into sinus rhythm. He died again, and we ended up defibrillating because we got the pads on at that point. But I've seen it work. So for those of you that don't know, a pericardial thump, or I think that precordial thump, I don't know what we're calling it. It's
Sounds
basically
right.
taking somebody that goes into cardiac arrest right in front of you, and it's punching them in the center of the chest. And in theory, this is the equivalent of a low joule defibrillation to the heart, and you can, in theory, get their heart beating again. Now, it's no longer recommended by any professional societies. AHA says don't do it. They say it's not effective. And I am always against anecdotal evidence, so you guys have full permission to be against this, because all we're giving you is 2 pieces of anecdotal experience with it. But for me, if I was in the middle of nowhere, I don't have an AED there, and I had a witness cardiac arrest, I'm absolutely trying it. I'm going to hit him in the chest to see if we can get that started, because No harm, I don't think, but might be beneficial.
Yeah, I've seen it twice. One was the ER doc. Guy went to VTAC and he like took off running, like around the doc's desk and like ran into room 5 and like slammed down this fist on this dude's chest. And I was like, oh God, like it worked. He converted. I'm not sure what happened afterwards, but the guy converted from there. Every time I've seen it, it's like you beat the crap out of him. And if I remember correctly, it really doesn't take that much pressure. Like you could literally just, I swear I remember, like you could put your elbow in a guy's stomach and like drop your fist and it would work. But like that's really old medicine. And then I had a cardiac arrest one time. I was a brand new paramedic and we had a life pack 10, which tells you how old of a paramedic I was. And we dropped the lady out of the bed. Like she was in cardiac arrest VFib and we jerked her out of the bed to get her in the floor. And when she hit the floor, she converted out of VFib and she Ross, like she survived. I was like, heck yeah. So we did not get a shocker. Like I was looking forward to, because the Life Pack 10 had the old school paddles where you had to rub them together and stick them to their chest. I was my first go at it and I was like, heck yeah, let's do this. And let's jerk her to the floor. We pulled her to the floor. I should have shocked her in the bed. I would actually got to do it. But we jerked her on the floor so we could do some CPR. And when we dropped her out of the bed, she converted a VFib and never went back into VFib again. I was like, that was my one in chance opportunity to feel like a real paramedic. And I didn't get a chance to do it.
I've always wanted to do the paddles. I have never gotten to do the paddles on anybody. And it's probably the biggest disappointment in my career.
Yep. I never did it. That was my one chance to do it. And one opportunity. And I was like, man, like I missed it. But I know people who have, and like I know some paramedics who have synchronized cardioverted with the paddles. Like that takes a big old set of balls. Like to look someone in the eyes and go, hey, I'm fixing to shock you. And it's gonna hurt, and I'm gonna hold these pads to your chest. 1, 2, 3, click.
You know, when they say, like, the crime investigators say, like, you know, oh, strangling somebody, it's a really, like, intimate crime. You know, they wanted to be up close. Like, I feel like that's the same with paddles. It's like you have to be, like, a little bit sadistic to, like, look into your patient's eyes, be like, I'm going to do this to you now.
Yes.
And press a big red button on top of them and cardiovert them. Oh, man, that's brutal.
Yes. Oh, man.
Cool. Well, that's all. Is there anything else you want to talk about or go through?
Yeah, that's it. That's all I can think of. I forgot about precordial thump, so you brought it up. I was like, I forgot all about that. Yeah, like that's pretty cool. Like you said, though, I do think there is a place for improvised medicine. It would definitely be a plan B or plan C. But having good medical equipment is priority. You can get those at medicalgearoutfitters.com. And then having some backup plans is important too. To be able to know how to improvise a tourniquet, what I can use for wound packing, what I can't use for wound packing, how to make a chest seal. I think those are all important lessons to learn. And it takes practice. Like you're not going to, this does take some practice doing it and saying, oh, this works or this doesn't work. Like you're going to need to practice those skills.
Yeah, absolutely. And not just like, especially with like the tourniquets and stuff, not just practicing the skill, but also practicing like what do you have on you right now? And how do you actually make a tourniquet? Like if you're going to do it, practice doing that. Practice cutting a shirt if that's what it's going to be for you. Practice, you know, taking a shirt and tying it and then doing a windlass. Like you have to practice from start to finish, not just like I have this perfectly cut. Oh, there you go. Perfect. Flashlight. Flashlight works excellent as a windlass.
Yeah, I was like, what do I have on me? And I like tried, as you said that, I looked down, I was like, oh, I have a Surefire. Like that would be a perfect windlass. I could make that. Pocket knife. So I think that would be, those are 2 tourniquets there with someone else's t-shirt because I have a bird chest and you don't want to see
that. Yeah. So practice the whole skill. Make sure you're familiar with it before you get put in this situation, because even skills you practice, you know, some of those skills go out the window when you're under a lot of stress. And if you're treating an arterial bleed, I guarantee you are under a lot of stress. So practice and try to use commercial stuff when you can.
Definitely. Before we go, I will say that we are working on doing a live chat. It will be at a decent time at night, so everybody can join us. We did pass 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, which was my goal. So super excited. If we do get a plaque, another silver plaque, I'll take it. I'll hang it up over here. So we got a little bit before we get to the silver play button. But I'm looking forward to doing a live chat. Like that was kind of our goal when we started the YouTube channel for Civilian Medical, was to do a live chat. So I'm looking forward to that. So pay attention to my YouTube channel, Sam's YouTube channel, our Facebook page. We'll get the information out there that we're going to do a live chat. So I'm excited to do that.
Should be a lot of fun.
Yep. Anything else?
That's it for me.
Awesome. Thank you guys. I appreciate the support. You guys are awesome.